veteran captain of the Northeastern, who, by the way, suffered a heart attack at sea earlier this month.
Sig Hansen survived 100-foot waves, near-death collisions, and the brutal wrath of the Bering Sea. But his biggest battles happened behind closed doors, with his own crew. One by one, the men closest to him began to drift. Some vanished without warning. Some turned bitter. And one even walked away after filing a lawsuit that stunned even longtime fans. But which of Sig Hansen's deckhands crossed the line? And were these betrayals really about the job or something far more personal? This is the part of Sig's life you were never supposed to see. The rise and challenges of Sig Hansen. From an early age, Sig Hansen understood that work came before comfort, and that earning your place on a fishing boat was not something that could be negotiated. It had to be proven, and this knowledge would follow him into adulthood and impact his relationship with the deckhands he worked with. At the age of 14, Sig began fishing and began helping on his family's vessel during the summer months when school was out. Over time, he gained experience working on deck, gradually building the skill set needed to survive in the dangerous and unpredictable waters of the Bering Sea. The Hansen family vessel, the Northwestern, would later become synonymous with success in the crab fishing industry. But in those early days, it was simply the boat that provided the family's income and demanded constant maintenance, precision, and teamwork. By the time Sig turned 22, he had taken over full responsibility for running deck operations, a role that required not only technical ability, but also leadership under pressure and familiarity with every inch of the boat. At 24, he became the full-time captain of the Northwestern, and this marked the beginning of his official leadership of one of the most well-known crab boats in the fleet. As captain, Sig prioritized efficiency, safety, and crew discipline, building a reputation over the next several years as someone who could be trusted to deliver strong crab hauls while keeping injury and mechanical failure to a minimum. Under his command, the Northwestern maintained one of the best safety records in the fleet and routinely returned to port with full tanks, often outperforming other vessels season after season. In 2005, when the Discovery Channel launched Deadliest Catch, a documentary-style reality television show focused on the Alaskan crab fishing industry, Sig Hansen and the Northwestern became central figures in the series. The show was all about how multiple boats battled brutal weather, mechanical breakdowns, and personal conflict while trying to earn a living catching crabs in the Bering Sea. On the show, Sig was known for his practical leadership style, sharp decision-making, and willingness to express frustration when expectations were not met. The series brought him into the homes of millions of viewers around the world and turned him into a public figure. But the day-to-day reality of his work remained the same, with long hours, freezing temperatures, and the need to make fast, accurate decisions that could mean the difference between profit and loss, or between safety and injury. Unfortunately, despite his professional accomplishments, Sig's personal and medical history has included a number of serious challenges, particularly in recent years. In 2016, while filming an episode of Deadliest Catch, Sig suffered a heart attack. The incident was so serious that he had to be airlifted from the scene and transported to a medical facility for emergency treatment. The health scare raised serious concerns among fans of the show, and especially among crew members and production staff, who had seen firsthand the high-stress environment in which Sig operated. 2 years later, in 2018, Sig experienced a second heart-related emergency. This time, it was the result of a severe allergic reaction to an antibiotic he had been prescribed for a sinus infection. The reaction triggered another heart attack, worsening the toll that years of stress, lack of sleep, and physical exhaustion had taken on his body. To make matters worse, Sig also had to deal with heartbreaking challenges that were unfolding in his personal life. In 2019, Sig revealed that his wife, June Hansen, had been diagnosed with cancer. The news became public during an episode of Deadliest Catch, in which Sig received a phone call from June informing him of her condition. The news left him heartbroken and in complete shock. For a man whose professional identity had been built around control, leadership, and immediate problem-solving, being separated from his wife during such a vulnerable time added emotional stress that he could not simply manage or fix in the way he was used to doing on deck. But his problems didn't end there because, between 2017 and 2018, Sig also faced a serious legal issue that became the subject of public attention. His estranged daughter, Melissa Ekstrom, filed a civil lawsuit accusing him of inappropriate behavior that allegedly occurred in the 1990s. While the case did not lead to criminal charges, a judge allowed the lawsuit to proceed in civil court, and the situation placed significant strain on Sig's personal life and public image. Sig has firmly denied the allegations, and the case remains unresolved in the court of public opinion. Still, the scandal did some damage to his career-focused public image. In the same period, Sig was involved in a separate incident that led to criminal charges. In 2018, he was arrested after a dispute with an Uber driver in Seattle escalated, and he was reported to have spat on the driver. Sig later pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and was ordered to complete community service and anger management. The incident earned him some intense backlash, but it also showed the world how the stress and pressure Sig had long carried at sea might also be affecting his behavior on land. While many of the challenges Sig has faced came from health issues and family matters, some of the most stressful and damaging problems he encountered over the years actually came from within his own crew. There have been deckhands who tested his patience, challenged his authority, and left behind a trail of problems that even a seasoned captain like Sig couldn't always fix. What went wrong off camera? While Deadliest Catch became a long-running success story for Discovery Channel and introduced audiences to the world of crab fishing in the Bering Sea, the reality behind the camera wasn't always as clean or coordinated as the final edit made it appear. Over the years, several disputes, controversies, and tragedies unfolded outside of what was shown on television, adding complexity to what viewers thought they knew about the people and operations involved in the show. One of the earliest challenges the show faced was the growing questions about how real some parts of the show actually were. Some former crew members and insiders alleged that certain injuries were exaggerated. Arguments were encouraged by producers, and some storms were edited in ways that made them seem more dangerous than they were. These claims led to occasional criticism that the series was blending reality with entertainment in a way that didn't fully reflect the true nature of the job. While the show's producers have always maintained that safety and authenticity are priorities, complaints about selective editing and narrative manipulation were raised more than once, especially in online forums and post-season interviews. Still, the dangers of crab fishing remained very real, and several events showed the true risks involved, regardless of how they were portrayed on television. Over the years, multiple vessels that had ties to the crab fishing community featured on Deadliest Catch either sank or were lost at sea entirely. The Big Valley sank in 2005, just before the show's first season aired, killing 5 out of the 6 men aboard. The Ocean Challenger went down in 2006, with only 1 survivor out of a 4-man crew. In 2008, the Alaska Ranger, a 189-foot fishing boat, sank in the Bering Sea, resulting in the deaths of 5 people and leading to one of the largest search and rescue operations in Coast Guard history. Most recently, the sinking of the Scandies Rose in December 2019 shocked the fishing community. The vessel capsized during a severe storm near Sotwick Island, Alaska, and only 2 of the 7 crew members survived. These incidents reminded everyone watching, both in and outside the industry, that the job remained deadly, even without cameras rolling. One of the most devastating moments in the history of Deadliest Catch happened in 2010 with the death of Captain Phil Harris, a fan favorite, and the captain of the Cornelia Marie. He suffered a stroke while offloading crab on St. Paul Island and later died from complications after being transported to a hospital in Anchorage. His passing was covered in real time by the show, and the episodes dealing with his final days drew some of the series' highest ratings. But more importantly, they served as a rare moment of unfiltered emotion in a series mostly defined by physical endurance and risk. His death had a long-lasting impact on fans, fellow captains, and his two sons, Josh and Jake Harris, who both struggled to move forward in the aftermath. These events showed that while the show might edit or dramatize certain storylines, the core reality remained intact. This was a job that involved real danger, real loss, and real consequences for everyone involved. And while Sig Hansen remained one of the central and most consistent figures on Deadliest Catch, even he was not immune to the ripple effects of the chaos around him. But not all of the trouble came from lawsuits or tragedy. Sometimes the biggest problems happened within the crew itself. Over the years, Sig Hansen has worked with dozens of deckhands. Some were loyal and skilled, while others were unpredictable and difficult. And while most of them did their jobs and left without incident, a few stood out for all the wrong reasons. One deckhand, in particular, started out as one of the most reliable for Sig Hansen on the Northwestern. However, his long tenure came to an unexpected and controversial end. Nick Mavar Jr. Nick Mavar Jr. was one of the most recognizable and consistent deckhands aboard the Northwestern, serving under Captain Sig Hansen from the very first season of Deadliest Catch in 2005 through to his final appearances in 2021. Over the course of more than 15 years on the show, Mavar established himself as a dependable presence that was respected both by the Northwestern crew and longtime viewers of the series. Mavar came from a long line of commercial fishermen and was part of a Croatian-American fishing family with deep ties to the Pacific Northwest and the Bering Sea. He is also the uncle of Captain Jake Anderson, who would later go on to command the Saga. During his years on deck, Mavar displayed a strong work ethic and physical resilience, and this made him a valued part of the Northwestern team, as the vessel regularly delivered high crab hauls and maintained a strong safety record. However, in December 2020, while the show was filming under modified conditions during the pandemic, Mavar experienced a medical emergency on board when he suffered a ruptured appendix. This was a serious and painful condition that required immediate attention, and upon receiving treatment ashore, doctors discovered that he also had a cancerous tumor, which added further complications to his health. The news of his condition caught everyone off guard and immediately raised concerns about how prepared the vessel was to handle medical emergencies during a time when travel restrictions, testing protocols, and limited access to hospitals had become ongoing challenges. Following the incident, Mavar filed a lawsuit in Alaska Superior Court, seeking $1 million in damages from both Sig Hansen and his wife, June Hansen. The suit alleged that Sig's company, which managed the Northwestern, failed to provide adequate medical planning or emergency procedures, particularly during the pandemic. Mavar claimed that the lack of a clear response plan delayed his treatment and put his life at further risk, especially given the seriousness of the cancer diagnosis that followed. The legal filing argued that proper protocols were not in place to respond to a public health emergency, and that this failure constituted negligence. In response, Sig Hansen's company filed a countersuit, this time directing legal blame toward the production company behind Deadliest Catch. The countersuit alleged that the show's producers were responsible for developing and managing health protocols during filming, including access to emergency care and medical transport. The legal battle made headlines in both fishing and entertainment circles and caused major damage to the relationship between Sig and one of his longest-serving crew members. After the incident, Nick Mavar did not return to the Northwestern or to the show. Before his tragic death in 2024, he focused on operating his own fishing vessel, which ran independently and under a different flag. Unfortunately, the long partnership between Mavar and Sig ended with court documents and unresolved tension, and it remains one of the most unexpected and public crew breakdowns in the show's history. However, Mavar wasn't the only deckhand to have issues with Sig, because another complicated crew dynamic would unfold, this time involving someone much closer to the Hansen family, both on the boat and behind the scenes. Jake Anderson. Jake Anderson began his journey on the Northwestern as a greenhorn deckhand in Season 3 of Deadliest Catch, which aired in 2007. Young, energetic, and eager to prove himself, Jake stood out early for his ambition and drive. He wasn't just interested in earning a paycheck. He wanted to learn every part of the vessel and move up in the ranks. Over time, he did exactly that. Under the guidance of Captain Sig Hansen, Jake earned promotions and more responsibility, eventually becoming a full-time crew member and then a relief deck boss. But Jake's rise was not without hardship. Behind the scenes, he experienced back-to-back personal tragedies that tested his emotional resilience. In 2009, he lost his sister to complications from pneumonia. Just a year later, in 2010, his father went missing under suspicious circumstances and was later confirmed to be deceased. Both events occurred while Jake was out at sea, and both were covered on the show, making his grief visible to a wide audience. These personal losses added weight to Jake's time on the boat and made his relationship with his crewmates, particularly Sig Hansen, more complex. Despite his work ethic, Jake's ambition occasionally led to friction. As he gained experience and confidence, he became more vocal about his own ideas and less willing to defer to Sig's authority. This shift reached a peak when Jake was boxed in Sig's crab gear in later seasons. This was considered a serious offense in crab fishing, where mutual respect between captains over fishing grounds is taken seriously. The move sparked a heated exchange between the two, with Sig publicly accusing Jake of betrayal and even calling him two-faced. Over time, the relationship between Jake and Sig appeared to cool, at least on camera. Jake focused on running his ship, while Sig continued to lead the Northwestern with his core crew. However, the story took a turn in Season 20, when Jake faced financial trouble and ultimately lost control of his vessel due to funding and ownership issues. With limited options, he returned to work under Sig on the Northwestern, a move that required him to put aside years of pride and past disagreements. Jake's return showed how quickly fortunes can change in the world of crab fishing, and while Sig offered him a spot back on deck, the unspoken tension remained as a reminder that past conflicts, even when resolved on the surface, tend to linger in tight spaces like the deck of a fishing boat. But not every deckhand brought conflict with leadership. Some carried battles of their own, often away from the wheelhouse and sometimes far beyond the deck. Matt Bradley. Matt Bradley's time aboard the Northwestern spans some of the show's most formative years. As one of the core deckhands under Sig Hansen, Matt helped define the culture of the boat during the early seasons of Deadliest Catch. At first glance, he seemed like a solid fit. He was tough, experienced, and quick to handle the brutal pace of crab fishing. But behind that capable exterior was a man fighting battles that didn't always show up on camera until they did. Matt had struggled with addiction for more than 2 decades. His substance abuse issues weren't a footnote to his story. They were central to the way his time at Northwestern played out. Over the years, there were several signs of trouble. Tensions between Matt and fellow crew member Jake Anderson began to escalate as both men battled personal demons. Eventually, things reached a breaking point when the two were involved in a physical altercation off-camera. Though the incident wasn't fully shown on the show, it had serious consequences. Jake was reportedly fired at the time, but Sig eventually had to take a deeper look at what was actually going on, with his deckhands behind the scenes. It was then he discovered that Matt's behavior had become unpredictable. Sig then made the difficult decision to let Matt go, citing safety concerns and the well-being of the rest of the crew. For a while, It looked like Matt's chapter on Northwestern was closed for good. He left the boat and shifted his focus to a new venture, a vape shop that he ran with his wife. It was a quiet pivot for someone whose life had played out in front of millions of viewers, and, for a time, it seemed to suit him. However, the financial reality of life on shore soon began to catch up. In season 19, Matt made a surprising return to the show, this time not under Sig Hansen, but under Jake Anderson. For years, Matt and Jake's falling out had shaped both their trajectories, but now their paths had converged again. Financial pressures may have driven the decision, but stepping back into that world required more swallowing pride, confronting past mistakes, and working with someone he had once gone toe-to-toe with. But not every deckhand who left the Northwestern did so quietly. Some exits were explosive, and one of them came from inside Sig Hansen's own family. Edgar Hansen. For many years, Edgar Hansen was more than just a familiar face on Deadliest Catch. As the younger brother of Captain Sig Hansen and the deck boss of the Northwestern, Edgar was the one who kept the engine running, both literally and figuratively. While Sig handled the wheelhouse and made the high-stakes decisions, Edgar was the quiet force managing the chaos below deck, keeping the crew in line and keeping the gear functioning. He was a natural problem solver, known for his mechanical intuition and dry humor. And in many ways, he was the one person Sig seemed to trust without question. Their brotherly bond was visible on the show. They bickered like siblings do, but the respect was obvious. Edgar had worked his way up through the ranks, starting as a greenhorn and eventually becoming one of the most experienced men on deck. Viewers saw him as the deckhand who was unshaken by the storms, unbothered by the cold, and unafraid of the grind. And it was these qualities that made his sudden and complete disappearance from Deadliest Catch all the more jarring. In 2018, news broke that Edgar Hansen pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge related to inappropriate conduct. The charge stemmed from an incident the year before, and the details, though not heavily reported by the show or network, were disturbing enough to end his television presence. As part of a plea deal, Edgar received a 364-day suspended jail sentence and probation, and was required to undergo evaluation and participate in treatment programs. It was a stunning turn of events for a man who, until then, had been seen as dependable, even beloved, by the show's audience. Discovery Channel acted quickly. Edgar was removed from the cast, and no mention was made of him in subsequent seasons. The show, known for its gritty honesty, offered no official farewell or explanation of his sudden absence. Yet, behind the curtain, Edgar never fully stepped away from the sea. He reportedly continued to work aboard the Northwestern, away from the spotlight, but still doing the job he'd known his entire life. Edgar Hansen's fall from grace remains one of the most complicated chapters in the show's long history. He was a brother, a leader, and a foundational part of Northwestern's success, but his off-camera actions forced a hard separation between the man and the myth. And as the show moved forward, others stepped in to fill the void he left behind, including one who would eventually marry into the Hansen family and carve out a place for himself on deck. Clark Peterson. When Clark Peterson first joined the crew of the Northwestern in 2016, fans didn't quite know what to make of him. Unlike the usual greenhorns, Clark wasn't some wide-eyed kid desperate for a paycheck or a second chance. He came aboard with a degree from the California Maritime Academy, experience navigating commercial vessels, and a reputation for discipline and professionalism. He also came with a connection no one could ignore. He was dating Sig Hansen's daughter, Mandy. By 2017, Clark wasn't just another deckhand. He was family. His marriage to Mandy sealed his place at Northwestern, but it also raised the stakes. For a boat Where loyalty, legacy, and hierarchy are everything, Clark's presence was both a privilege and a pressure cooker. Sig didn't treat him with kid gloves. If anything, the bar was set even higher. Clark's calm demeanor and book-smart background made him stand out from the rough-and-tumble world of Bering Sea crab fishing. But it wasn't long before he proved he wasn't just the son-in-law with a clipboard. In Season 20, the Northwestern faced catastrophic power failure at sea, one of its most dangerous crises to date. With the vessel drifting in frigid waters and no electronic navigation systems online, Sig and Clark were forced to rely on a magnetic compass and muscle memory, something few captains use anymore. Together, they manually steered the boat back to Dutch Harbor, fighting not just the elements, but the fear of losing control. But that wasn't the only scare that season. During filming, an unexpected wave knocked both Clark and a cameraman overboard. For a few chilling seconds, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, crew members scrambled, and the cold, black water swallowed two men whole. Fortunately, they were both pulled to safety. But the footage, later aired by Discovery, sent viewers into a frenzy. Was it real? Or had it been staged for drama? Fans flooded message boards and social media, with theories flying in every direction. Some questioned the authenticity of the moment, pointing out the camera angles and editing. Others were quick to praise the crew's fast response and the raw vulnerability of showing just how fast things can go wrong on the Bering Sea. For Clark, the incident became a defining moment, not because of the speculation, but because of how he handled it. Clark remains an active part of the Northwestern legacy, and, as a key player in the operation, often takes the helm as relief captain and guides the next generation of crabbers into even rougher waters. But while Clark's journey has been one of resilience and steady growth, another deckhand took a much darker path filled with ego, volatility, and a spiral that played out in front of millions. Elliot Nice. When Elliot Nice first showed up on Deadliest Catch in Season 7, he was barely in his late 20s and already a captain. Elliot was young, bold, and burning with something that looked like ambition or maybe ego. Either way, he wasn't there to earn respect slowly. He demanded it, and it rubbed a lot of the veterans the wrong way, especially Sig Hansen. From day one, Elliot's presence on the Ramblin' Rose, and later the Saga, sparked tension. Sig, a man who had clawed his way up from the deck and knew every bolt and barnacle of the Northwestern, didn't take kindly to what he saw as Elliot's reckless decision-making and abrasive leadership style. Their clashes were less about personal beef and more about deep, fundamental differences in how a boat should be run and what kind of man should be in charge of it. And Sig wasn't alone in that thinking. Over the years, Elliot developed a reputation, and not the kind you want in the Bering Sea. His leadership was frequently called into question, not just by rival captains, but by his own crew. There were rumors of walkouts, onboard arguments, and accusations that the work environment had turned toxic. However, the breaking point came in Season 11, when Elliot's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was missing from key moments, lashing out during radio calls and visibly unraveling under the pressure. And then, he suddenly walked off the Saga mid-season with no warning or transition. He left his crew in the middle of the Bering Sea with no captain and no explanation. Production was thrown into chaos. The crew scrambled to regain control, and the rest of the fleet watched in disbelief. That's when the truth started to surface. Elliot later admitted he had been struggling with substance abuse. Behind the bravado and sharp tongue was a man battling addiction, a storm far more brutal than anything the Bering Sea could throw at him. He entered rehab, publicly shared his struggles, and stepped away from Deadliest Catch entirely that season. Since then, Elliot has kept a relatively low profile, but he remains one of the most controversial figures to ever appear on the show. Sig Hansen definitely learned that not every deckhand you bring aboard is cut out for the storm. Some bring their own. Which of these deckhands surprised you the most? Tell us in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. Like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.